We all work together on this interview here too. Like we came together as a team, and I just want to open the floor to some of our.
I'd say this is the most fun, and not just that, but I think the most insightful interview I've had. It's certainly the longest form I've done. It's a real delight. Like there, a lot of thought and preparation went into this. So it's always great for my side to be on the responding end. I actually the questions were facilitated the answers. I'm not picking teeth, pulling teeth to let's get to a topic. So you guys obviously did an enormous amount of work. I appreciate that.
I appreciate that a lot because we weren't looking at this like, oh, let's do like a hit piece on this guy. You know what I mean? Because let's get clicks here. You know what I mean? I just wanted to have an open conversation because this is a rare opportunity to talk to someone who owns a tech giant right now. So it's
my partner who's our public engagement head. She watched a couple of your videos and said, these are good guys. Right? She's like, they're funny guys. She said, but I think fundamentally they're good natured. Go. Let's reach out to them. Let's talk to these guys.
That's a shout out, Sarah. The Sebastian Maniscalco impression is making a comeback at some point. I promise that too. She sent me that and I was like, that was like towards the end of an episode. Like, you guys did your research. I like that. But yeah, everyone here helped put this together. So I'm going to lead the floor with Colman over here, one of our lead journalists, to ask some questions, and we'll go to Phalen as well.
How you doing, man?
I'm having a ball.
Good. I'm glad. Me too. I'm gonna piss a little bit.
I'm gonna get a little water.
Yeah. All right.
Even I get tired of hearing me talk.
Same.
God. You're not alone.
Okay. So I want to kind of take some time to drill down on the liabilities stuff and the due diligence that you guys were doing.
Sure.
Because I think it's an important part of the story. I mean, you're a defense lawyer and you've bought into a company with a lot of legal history, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So I just want to take something that you said earlier in the episode, and we'll lead with that. You said that MindGeek complies with the laws in every jurisdiction that they operate in.
Yeah. Has
that always been the case?
Yeah, so look, part of diligence is you look at the facts as they are. So one of the things that I did was I reviewed, both for myself and the Canadian side, but also by engaging, counsel elsewhere to look at, are they complying? So our assessment was they do comply, right? Now, as a lawyer, I can tell you, there's always going to be a debate. I've had many cases where the government thought someone didn't comply, and we thought they did, and you go to court and you see which side prevails. That's the nature of complex regulation. We live in a modern society with complex regulation. I am very proud as a lawyer, as an individual, to be associated with this company in terms of its compliance with the law. Their legal department is incredibly thorough, but their trust and safety guides everything they do. It's actually really interesting. They're an organization where trust and safety sits above all. It's one of their animating values. It's not, you have product, and to get the product out the door, you need legal compliance. So give us that stamp, please. We start with trust and safety. Let's make the product then work under that rubric of trust and safety. So I'm very, very proud of that compliance. I'll talk about legal liability for a minute. So here we'll have a little bit of corporate law and liability discussion. All right. There are two ways to buy a company, generally speaking. You can either do an asset purchase or a share purchase. An asset purchase means you just buy their stuff, right? You don't buy MindGeek, the company. You buy all of MindGeek's stuff, right? You buy their building or their physical infrastructure. You buy their employees' contracts. You buy their software, their IP. That's an asset purchase. When you make an asset purchase, you don't get any liabilities, right? The lawsuit stays with the shares. It stays with the shareholders. You just get the stuff, okay? Now, that carries all sorts of other complexities. If they don't have any money to pay off the liabilities, also it gets down a black hole. Or you do a share purchase. And when you buy a share purchase, you buy the shares. And the shares have the ownership rights over the assets, over the IP, but also have the liabilities. And when we went into this transaction, we decided very, very early on, this will be a share purchase. We are not running away from the liabilities. We are not running away from litigation. We're not trying to hide money, be part of anything like that. We are going to be open and public that we have acquired the shares. So when we acquired 100% of the shares and all of the former shareholders exited, ethical capital partners ultimately, as the shareholders, hold on to that liability. And I think, like I said, I can't discuss specifics of ongoing litigation. As a lawyer, an officer of the court, I'm not allowed to, right? It's not just that I don't want to. In fact, I want to, but I can't as an officer of the court. What I can say is you have a group of sophisticated counsel getting good advice who are very comfortable taking on that litigation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, I have a follow-up to that part, but yes, I do want to push back maybe a little bit on what you said about the Pornhub being a company that really wants to have the compliance first, and then they get the product through that compliance rather than just looking for a stamp. Yeah. When we were looking into this story, into this purchase and into this interview, I came across an article in the Daily Mail, which, but are you aware of the allegations that in this article, it talks about the moderators being burnt out and being pressured to find reasons to like validate the content that's on there?
Look, I can tell you what I have seen, right? I can't necessarily speak to a specific person making a comment at a specific point in time, okay? I have been to Cyprus. I have been to the moderation facilities. I have seen, shifts of hundreds of people working very seriously. By the way, not just humans alone. They're assisted with AI tools doing this work. I've seen their training manuals, but I've also seen the audits of their work. So we have on one side the moderation, but we also have a completely independent team that checks that work, right? That goes looking for errors. I can speak to what's in place now. And what is in place now is a very far cry from what was described, right? You have people who very much care about the work they do, but it's also tested, right? We, use like an old Air Force analogy. You got blue team and red team. So the blue team are your fighter pilots, and the red team are the guys, they're flying Soviet jets pretending to be, the Russians or the Chinese, and they're trying to take them down at every turn. We have a red team. And that red team never stops operating, and they are clever people, and they're always looking for those gaps, right? Now, it's like you talk about issues on a platform, okay? You can't have a bank where you say, can you guarantee me that you'll never be held up? I'm not putting my money here unless you guarantee, well, there's no such bank. Good day, right? Because there will always be criminals trying to do bad things. That's not how risk is managed on an enterprise level, right? Risk is managed by having an organization that puts safety and security first and is constantly testing themselves and open to the benefit of experience from others. There is no such thing as a state of perfection of risk management. That's a fantasy. And if you set that up as your standard, you'll never properly manage risk, right? But you have a culture of risk management and you have processes in place that reveal deficiencies, you'll improve as an organization, right? And I'm very, very proud of what MindGeek has done to get there, but what they're doing every day to get there.
Mm-hmm. So you're comfortable with you've identified, just to recap, you've identified that there have been some liabilities, but you're comfortable with taking those on.
Yeah. So remember, liabilities are allegations,
right?
Okay. So they will get their way through the court system, right? And where there are wrongs that need to be righted, that's what we're going to do, right? That's what grown-ups do. That's what responsible companies do. There lots of companies are the subject of lawsuits. Some are frivolous, they get dismissed. Some are founded, and people who are harmed get compensation. It's that simple, right?
Right.
When you're committed to just outcomes, then you follow those just outcomes wherever they lead.
Okay.
And it's impossible to prejudge them. But we know what our values say. We are committed to just outcomes.
Perfect. Yeah. The reason I'm harping.
It's not harping. These are the right questions to ask.
No, great.
It's a little harping, Colman. It's a little harping.
The reason I've been focused on this.
It's the right thing to be focused on.
Is one of the things that triggered in my brain when you mentioned that the quote about complying with the laws in every jurisdiction that they operate in. It feels to me like I'm getting lawyered a little bit. Because that jurisdiction piece, that's obviously very key. If you saw my
legal bills, you would know that we're the ones getting lawyers, right? I was just saying, do you know what it costs? Well, the same jurisdiction we operate in, do you know what it costs in order to stay legally compliant? And we pay that cost, right? And it's one we're proud to do. But you have EU laws, and then you have US laws, you have Canadian laws, you have Cypriot law, you have Luxembourg law. We're surfacing content in areas. We have local laws to deal with. We have regulation, state, provincial in some cases, right? So it's very, very complex. I just use that because it doesn't minimize compliance, it maximizes. What I'm saying is every jurisdiction where you can access our site legitimately, where you don't have to go around a VPN because it's blocked or not served there. There are obviously some countries that just ban adult material. So I can't talk about being compliant there. They ban the material. material. And if people use VPNs or creative ways to get around it, like that's what they're doing, right? But we're talking about places where jurisdictions that we operate in, and that's every, your sort of Western liberal democracies, the countries that we want to visit,
right.
might be a good way to put it. We comply with their laws no matter how difficult and complex they are. And when we think that they're wrong, we challenge them in the courts. Mm-hmm. That's the other part about this. It doesn't mean that you just say, oh yeah, whatever laws you want, those are great. If we think that a law is wrong or unconstitutional, we will lead the charge against it, right? But we'll do it through the legal system, not outside of the legal system. Yeah. We will never just say, we're not interested in compliance, because compliance is at the center of what we do.
I just got like a couple more things.
Yes, please.
Another reason why I was interested in your use of the word jurisdiction, like specifically in that quote, is because it came up a lot in this House Ethics Committee study on the protection of privacy and reputation on platforms such as Pornhub. Yes. I'm sure you had to read it for this thing.
Had to. I spent a lot of time poring over it, for sure. Yes. And asked myself what I would have said differently, right? And how that should have gone differently, and how other people's voices should have been part of that committee, including sex workers should have been at that committee. But
if you want to expand more on that, that's very interesting.
Some of the people we've been consulting with, including one sex worker, applied. She wanted to be at that committee and testify about what the effects of Exodus Cry and NCOSE had been on her livelihood, her friend's livelihood. She's basically told, we just want to hear the trafficking hub story, and then we want to go hard on the MindGeek owners, right? And we're committed to changing that. That is changing. Those sex workers are getting a voice. So, that committee only heard one side of the story. The difference between Ethical Capital Partners and the previous owners of MindGeek is that where the previous owners of MindGeek had to be required to attend those committees, we are seeking invitations. Any bill that's being studied that we think could touch on the work that we do, we are asking to attend. I've appeared a number of times at committee talking about various legal issues, from firearms, criminal law, constitutional law, but we're going to be banging down the door to be there. We want to be there. We want to explain, to give insight and give a perspective. But yeah, let's hear about I want to hear about that quote.
Yeah, well, just with the jurisdiction in mind.
Yeah.
There was testimony at that committee from former RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki.
Yes.
Who said that the jurisdiction issues played into its treatment of MindGeek, especially with regard to the Mandatory Reporting Act of 2011.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're familiar. If you want to explain to the listeners.
I would love to explain what the Mandatory Reporting Act is.
Yeah.
So in Canada, in general, okay, I get to go law professor. This is fabulous. Thank you so much for this. And I can't wait to engage with this. So in Canada, in general, it's not illegal to fail to report a crime, okay? So in general, if you see something terrible happening, oh my, okay, I'm not your lawyer. So now that's in general. You can see something awful happening and walk away. That's not a crime. It might make you a shitty human being, but it's not a crime. Okay? There are exceptions to it. So one of the most commonly known exceptions are what we call mandatory reporters. So there are certain individuals who are in a position of trust, like lawyers, by the way, or teachers, doctors, psychologists, therapists, etc. If they, for example, have evidence of child abuse, they must report it. They have a legal obligation to report it. Okay? The Mandatory Reporting Act took that one step further. And it's a really neat piece of legislation. It's funny you said you think I know about it. I was actually in Las Vegas last year at a criminal law conference lecturing about the Mandatory Reporting Act. Right?
Is that it?
Well, that's where the best legal conferences are.
That was the business side of the trip.
Lecturing about it because it's a very little known piece of legislation. This is what it says. It says that anyone who provides an internet service in Canada, if they are aware of child sex abuse material on their platform, they must make a report of it. So the people that you think that usually covers, like let's say you're running a server farm, all right? You're giving people web storage services, right? You're not Amazon or Google. You're running a little mom and pop server farm, and there are many of them, right? Particularly before like cloud storage was a real thing. That's how people hosted sites. Most people didn't have them on these big servers. So if you find, you're doing your sweep and you see, what's this file? What does this guy have on there? It's not an option to just be like delete or you're fired. You have to make a report. So the legislation designates bodies that who do you report to? So it gives you some organizations to report to. Now, let's talk about MindGeek, for example. All right. So does MindGeek operate an internet service in Canada? This is a question, right? First of all, do they operate an internet service? They do, but they don't operate one in Canada. They don't have servers in Canada. Their corporation is not headquartered in Canada. Technically, I would say, I'm not their lawyer, that they are not required under the Mandatory Reporting Act to report to a Canadian jurisdiction. Now, I'll tell you this. They report to American jurisdictions, Cypriot jurisdiction, and Luxembourg jurisdictions. But let me tell you something else. And this is not information that was before the committee. It's information that I have seen with my own eyes, the correspondence between MindGeek and the RCMP, in which MindGeek says to the RCMP, and this is like, the commissioner's not going to have this granular level of detail, but this is absolutely the truth. MindGeek said to the RCMP, we don't know if you have jurisdiction under the Mandatory Reporting Act. Anyways, we're already making reports to NCMEC in the US and to other authorities when we discover this material. We want to report to the RCMP as well. How often should we report? I've seen the emails. I'm like, yeah, just send us, once a month, twice a month. They begged to comply with legislation where it's unclear even if it applies to them by the letter of the law. Okay? So that's the kind of company that I want to be associated with. Not they're saying, well, how do you weasel out of the wording of the legislation? They say, whether it applies to us or not, it's the right thing to do. There's no reason we shouldn't be doing it. And all they do is they just send a duplicate of a report. Let's say someone attempted to upload something illegal. It got caught, filtered out. Of course, we send it to NCMEC in the US. Of course, we send it to European authorities because the company is headquartered in Luxembourg, has office in Cyprus. But we also, can we please send it to you as well, RCMP? And they said, sure, you can. That is the truth. So these discussions where, parliamentarians or advocacy groups like Exodus Cry said, why isn't there an RCMP investigation of MindGeek? It's like, investigation? Like, we're an ally to law enforcement. Of course there's not going to be an investigation or charges by the RCMP. We regularly interact with them to assist them in their legal work. Like, and I say this, with passion, because this is an example of where people are sitting in Parliament who don't know the facts, only know what, Exodus Cry has put to them in a letter that's full of misstatements. And I can tell you from the inside, the RCMP charge MindGeek? The RCMP relies on MindGeek. And this was buried in the commissioner's statement where she said, it's important, like industry plays an important role in combating illegal material. And I can tell you, MindGeek is second to none in assisting law enforcement in prosecutions. I was talking to a colleague of mine who works in a different jurisdiction in Canada who had a case where someone attempted to upload something illegal to a MindGeek platform. And they said, without the responsiveness of the company, giving the data that was required by law, doing it in a timely fashion, explaining it, this would have been a very different investigation and prosecution. So I'm a defense lawyer, but I firmly believe in the role that law enforcement plays in defending public safety and keeping kids and other people safe. So, I'm really, really proud of the work we do under the Mandatory Reporting Act.
That's very interesting. I'm one thing that I want to stick on just a little bit is that there was testimony from NCMEC at that committee as well, and they did mention that MindGeek had also failed to report CSAM.
Yeah, so it goes like this: you can't report something if you don't detect it, right?
Right.
So there were always going to be challenges and gaps in detecting material, right? So, for example, in detecting CSAM, when you're talking about images where it's difficult to tell, for example. Now, once again, that can't happen. We have verified uploader. We have real, a robust content moderation that didn't exist in this full way. Verified uploader didn't exist on the same scale. There's a reason why, in the wake of these allegations, what did MindGeek do? Remember what they did? They deleted 8 million pieces of content. Okay, so recognizing that those simply don't meet our standards, right? That we need to improve our standards. So there's no question that as part of what we're doing, this journey involves recognizing that, we've fallen short in the past. There's no question about it, but you'll never get better if you don't do that, if you just close your eyes and ears. So today, let's talk about NCMEC's most recent report, all right? So NCMEC's most recent report found two, I think, critical things. They released a report of all social media platforms and two statistics. One, how many reports were made? And two, what was the time from NCMEC informing them that content was illegal and them taking it down? So you go down that list. Microsoft, X number, many. Okay, Google, Meta. What are their response times? 8 days for Microsoft, right? 8.5 days, Google's in that area. You know what MindGeek's response time was? 4 hours. So that tells you asked me about a culture of trust and safety. A culture of trust and safety is a team that is working at a breakneck pace that remember, we're talking about criminals who try to exploit these platforms. When they try to exploit the platforms, a 4-hour response time. There is nobody on the internet, particularly in the mainstream arena, who comes close. Once again, we talked about managing risk. There will always be room for improvement. That's why we want NCMEC reporting these statistics. Why did Pornhub start a transparency report? We wanted to tell the world how many instances of CSAM we found, how many we took down, how long it took, so we can be judged on that. Because if we're not being open about that, why would we get better, right? It starts with transparency. So I'm delighted by having that feedback from NCMEC, from having law enforcement tell us where the gaps are, right? What do we know? We know fundamentally that we are trying to do everything we can and mustering our resources to fight this problem and to keep the platform safe. But we need input from others, right? We need feedback.
Yeah, very interesting. All right, last thing, and then I'll give it to I'll give it to Phalen. I just want to talk a little bit about that privacy aspect. Yeah. Now, you mentioned that there are well, let's start like this. Are there steps that you wouldn't take? And where's the steps that you wouldn't take if the government mandated it?
Sure, I'll give you an example. If the government mandated, for example, that we personally take the identifying information of any user to the site. So they said, in order to get to a site like Pornhub, you have to give Pornhub your license, your government ID, your personal information. We would simply not do business in that jurisdiction. There is no business that is worth us putting the risk of people's fundamental privacy rights at issue. It's not going to happen. Now, we're not going to not comply. We're just not operating in that jurisdiction. Now, we're also going to, engage in advocacy efforts to change that law, to try to bring public awareness, bring legislative awareness, but that's not something that we're willing to do.
Okay. So the reason I ask is because I came across a Globe and Mail report from earlier this month, which said that they're reporting that in the forthcoming Heritage Ministry's online safety bill, they're reporting that porn sites would have to verify users are over 18. So I mean, I'm not sure if that's something that you mentioned that you were already kind of working on.
Of course, we're working on it. Yeah, and we don't yet have language. Right. What we're working on is. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Finish your question.
No.
When I'm a lawyer asking people questions in the court, I don't like being cut off. And I didn't mean to. I'm excited. But if there's more, go ahead.
Yeah, just a little bit more. This seems to be kind of drawing some of the recommendations from the Ethics Committee report, right? A lot of the age verification stuff, a lot of the Mandatory Reporting Act, making it more enforceable, making sure that there's a law enforcement agency dedicated to enforcing there.
Yes.
So are you worried that there might be more provisions under the online safety bill that the Heritage Ministry is about to release that would interfere with your ability to keep data privacy the way you need it to be, to keep compliance where you need it to be?
So I'll say this, when it comes to issues like verifying identity, like content takedown times, we are light years ahead of whatever bill comes out, right? And the NCMEC report speaks for itself. Our transparency report speaks for itself. Age verification is one where we are committed to advocating for age verification solutions that are, number one, effective, okay? They're only effective if they're at the device level. If they're at the site level, you just go to a different site. And if they're not subject to jurisdiction, like they don't have an office in Montreal, they're going to thumb their noses at Canadian law. That's what they're going to say. We don't do that. So it needs to be one that applies to the entire internet. The only way to apply to the entire internet is to start at the device level. So we're committed to working with legislators, with regulators, to ensure that the online harms bill is the best bill that it can be. And it's one that actually accomplishes what it needs to do. So the reason why, let's say, site-by-site verification doesn't work is not because we think it's difficult or we think it's onerous or we don't want to hold that information. That's our reason. That's reason 4, 5, and 6. Okay. Reason number 1 is it won't protect children because other sites won't do it. They're located in jurisdictions that are beyond the reach of the Canadian government, and they're going to say no, which means you're going to just move that traffic off of Pornhub elsewhere. How does that protect kids? So the device solution is the only one that protects children. We are working now, and we look forward to being there at Parliament, to having those policy discussions, and to be that voice that says this is the solution, not just for the adult industry, but for the entire internet.
Are you right now involved with the study of that bill?
So the bill hasn't been released. The language of that bill has not been released.
I know the ministry is studying it, though. Are there talks even at this time?
Once again, I don't. There's confidences. I don't want to get into prejudicing discussions in the background. It is very, very much on our radar. It's high on our priority list. We want good age verification, right? We do not want children accessing this material, but the laws have to support that effort, right? If the laws simply say sites, you need to verify age, otherwise you'll be in trouble. Great. Your site located in Russia doesn't care. We'll get all that traffic. Children will just go from site A to site B.
Right.
What you want is to allow the good actors to be good actors.
So this is the last thing. Is there a version of this bill where you look at the language and you just say, listen, this has to be Microsoft, Google, and Apple. This can't be us. Yeah. We're not going to be able to comply, or we're just going to...
My belief is it won't come to that. I think it'll be Google, Apple, Microsoft, and the other actors will come to the table and say, this is the solution, right? Whether it's a first draft or a second draft, that's the beauty of our legislative process, is that we have debate, we have study, we have consideration. But I think the consensus is now getting pretty clear that if it's not device-based, it doesn't work. It's like you either have a wall and the device is the wall, or you just put a doorway in the middle of the desert. And what do you do when you don't want to walk to the doorway? You just walk around it, right? That cannot possibly work. And I do trust in the good sense of our legislators to get this right. And we're going to give them the assistance, the academic research, the technical research, the legal information to get it right. I don't know. Like this is, I have to say, like I said, one of the most comprehensive topics. Like we've covered almost anything about this. I want to hear the questions, of course.
Yeah, everything. All we need now is, what do we need now? What haven't we covered?
Need a beer.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah. Yeah. What's your opinion on the U.S. drinking age? No.
In which state?
Yeah. Fuck. True.
You can get drafted into the military. You can buy a gun. You can't buy a beer.
Oh, we're gonna open up those doors now.
Yeah. Phalen, Tynes-MacDonald, Down to the Wire News, and resident multitasker.
Yeah. Seriously. You guys are a wicked team. This is fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So I most of the research that I was doing was involved with this pending online safety bill.
Yeah.
And Colman did ask a bunch of questions around that. I do have one question though. So those conversations regarding this pending piece of legislation that's going to be ever changing for a while now. The last round table on that online safety with a bunch of key players involved ended in like November.
Yeah, we didn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like they went from like July to November, and this was when MindGeek was under previous ownership.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, have those conversations sort of returned now that it's under new leadership, and these measures, like you have these new ideas for security and improvement?
Yeah. So like I said, we're reaching out to all the stakeholders. In fact, we just announced yesterday that we are beginning this round of our roundtables and consultations, because we think that it's not just that we have the ideas, but we need to platform. Let's hear what the sex workers think about age verification. Let's hear what banking partners think. Let's hear about what industry thinks. So we are committed to being that voice and that platform. When it comes to the online harms bill, right now it's really difficult to talk about it because it's theoretical, right? Yeah. There's no language. Yeah. We hope to be able to work, like I said, with legislators, with the policy folks, both at Heritage and Justice. Making legislation is complicated work, so that we can inform, right? We can provide a perspective that's really valuable. And I think, we have experience that nobody else has. We have been dealing with age verification in numerous jurisdictions, right? We were, the only adult site to comply with Louisiana's age verification. And Louisiana, they didn't do site-based, so we complied. Obviously, we didn't just shut down, but what they did is they linked it. They have a digital ID. They have something called LA Wallet, where they have a state digital ID. So we allowed that to plug into our site. That's a subpar situation because it still is not device-based. It's not universal. It's not adopted by, even the majority of people in Louisiana. And a lot of kids, no doubt, can just go to a different site. But we're able to comply because we weren't taking user information. So we've actually seen what is an absolute non-starter. We've seen what's a subpar situation. And we've also seen jurisdictions that are talking about device-based age verification. So we want to take the benefit of all of that expertise. We've actually done this. We've built the key for that door. When, as this bill moves forward, I'll tell people, you can expect this. You can certainly expect us to be a vocal part of that process. You can expect it shortly to start hearing some things from us about age verification. And you can expect that certainly when any bill is before Parliament, we will be there at committee to share the benefit of our expertise and our experience.
And then I have another question around the security measures that you've been talking about. I mean, Safeguard is the one, that has a name. And that that is very public.
It is very public.
But I'm curious, the way you talked about acquiring MindGeek and going in and sort of looking under the hood and seeing all of this tech that's there and has all sorts of potential. I'm curious about the sort of the timeline, not necessarily on your acquisition, but on the security measures, just because if these things already existed or were kind of in the works and stuff, how did they not keep MindGeek from falling into this massive controversy?
So remember, the controversy erupts in December of 2020. All right. The deleting of user-generated content that hadn't gone through the verified uploader process happens in January 2021, right? So shortly after, within months, and this also tells you something about how nimble this company is, right? How resilient they are. That they said, okay, we've got an issue here. 8 million pieces of UGC, user-generated content, gone. Verified uploader now goes up for everybody. And it's interesting because the rest of the adult industry said, you guys are dead. You cannot verify every uploader. Right? Just people post things and they fill out this form and that form. You can't do this verified uploader thing. You will die. Guess what happened? Pornhub didn't die. People were like, we want to be on the platform that gets huge traffic and is the only brand in adult. One of the ways I talk about this, they say, why do people stay? Why did, even though, like we discussed, the verified uploader, it's not an instantaneous process, right? It takes time, it takes effort, it takes trust. It's because when you think about it, you say, what's the brand? Give me a brand in online adult content. There's one. There's one where you say, what are the colors of an online? What's the logo? There's one. And that means that the content creators were committed to being, to staying on that platform because they knew that's where the traffic was. And they trusted them with their data. So you just need to understand that timeline, right? So that happens in 2021. By the time, obviously, we come to do our due diligence, even though the company is in distress because of Visa and MasterCard being turned off and the terrible media, they have already built the foundation and much of what we're discussing here, right? And now, as well, even tools like Safeguard, they had built Safeguard previously, but for other purposes. They, originally were using it to protect intellectual property, to detect changed versions of their own IP elsewhere on the internet. But it became quickly obvious that to address and solve this problem, it could be easily adapted for use to protect the platform from CSAM and non-consensual imagery. And we think that it can be easily adapted to do the same thing on the rest of the internet. So, in many ways, timing's everything, right? We were very fortunate that MindGeek had taken the steps ahead. If they hadn't, this would be a non-starter. You're not going to walk into a company that has the liabilities of press and really doesn't have the goods, but they had the goods. They had built them, and what they needed was new ownership to allow that to actually flourish. So it's a situation where, I think people look at this and be like, what a great move, right? And you're like, yeah, it was, it's taking the step, but it's only because of what MindGeek built in response to challenge, which comes back to that question about, talking about past challenges. They've built incredible things, and I think are going to be a symbol for trust and safety in the adult space and in mainstream internet because they face challenges. And they took those challenges and they learned from them and they built some really extraordinary, tech and culture. That's what gave us the opportunity to do this. It would be great to claim credit for all of it, but there was some extraordinary timing and extraordinarily good work on MindGeek's part that allowed us to be here.
You just threw your name on the project right before that.
Exactly, right? We've been talking about your academic approach, so no, it's when we went in there. Okay, you asked about the diligence, and I told you about not knowing what to expect. I had never been in a internet porn company in my life. I thought I'm walking into some real sketchy situation, and I found a tech company, and I found a culture of people who are building important software and want to talk about their projects and are like tech engineers everywhere else, except their stakes are higher because they're building, when you're building for trust and safety to combat CSAM and to verify uploaders and to moderate content. This is really, really important stuff. This is not just like how many likes does Aunt Betty's recipes get on Facebook and how do you keep the Karens out of the comments, right? This is how do you keep pedophiles out of the comments, right? And how do you track the language that they use that changes every day? And how do you build a database of 15,000 plus terms that's modified by AI on an hourly basis? Those are important tasks. And I met people who are thrilled to be doing those challenges, but wanted ownership who will speak on their behalf. So in a lot of ways, it was a very easy marriage. Right? We found an extraordinary asset. We think there's real untapped potential, and we look forward to achieving it.
So just so that I'm I'm understanding correctly, that a lot of these measures came about like in that short span of
so some of them had been used in other areas of the business. So for example, were used on the monetized content, but not the 8 million UGC that didn't go through the verified uploader.
Okay.
But there was a difference between directly monetized content. Now it's for all content.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And so you have a company, which is, once again, this was a company that in my view was doing their best. Right. And we're making strides, and we're still ahead of the internet. We're far ahead of other platforms, but because of their brand, they were also a big target, right? And when your anti-porn extremists wanted to take someone down, there was no question what brand they wanted to take down. And to me, that's a challenge now, right? A good challenge. It's when you have that brand and you own that segment, you have a heightened responsibility. You can't just be good, right? You can't just be good enough. You can't just be legally compliant, right? You need to be at the forefront of this fight. And that's what we found in MindGeek, and we're taking them to the next level, with our investment, our partnerships, our advisors, what we bring to the table.
I just have a couple more here.
Yes, please.
So I'm sure, I mean, we've mentioned the documentary on Netflix a couple of times, and I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah, happy to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm curious, some of the critiques and the critiques that were mentioned in there. I'm curious what your response is to them now. And obviously it wasn't about ECP.
No.
But now you guys are part of that
conversation. It came out the day before we launched.
Exactly,
a lot of people thought we timed it. And I said, I have the power to control Netflix documentaries. I'll say this. I found it on the whole very positive, and I'll tell you why. The negative perspective was nothing new. In other words, there was not a single new allegation, which tells you a lot, right? They've had 2 years to go digging. And it tells you something about our processes today. Okay, you had the same people making the same claims, and I actually thought that a lot of critical eye was really turned to who they were and what their motives were. What I loved about the documentary was that for once, sex workers were platformed, right? And you had people giving a take that I think the Exodus cry and the anti-porn extremists just want to sweep under the rug. And I was really happy to hear that perspective, right? Because it's one that has not been at the center of the discussion until now. So those criticisms, right? Like I said, are allegations which are dated. Some of them are the subject of litigation. We will address them, right? There will be a conclusion to those litigations. When there's claims which are frivolous, they will be dismissed. When there are those which are meritorious, they will be addressed through just outcomes. It's that simple. That's what good citizens commit to doing, right? You say if there are issues in the past, they'll be corrected. If there were wrongs, they'll be righted. If there were falsehoods, the truth will be told.
I thought the same thing. I thought it more so exposed the true nature of Exodus Cry and NCOSC more so than anything else.
Yeah, I think nobody had put together that, NCOSC, that these are those morality and media guys.
Yeah.
These were people picketing sex shops who were trying to shut down same-sex marriage, who were trying to take copies of, steamy romantic novels out of public libraries, right? Like, that's who these folks are. And with all due respect, the conversation has moved on, right? And one of the things, that I'm really proud of in Pornhub is centering diverse sexual and gender identities, which drives them bananas. It drives morality and media and Exodus Cry bananas. They don't want to have that conversation, right? They don't want there to be a place where people can explore identities that they had no idea existed before, find community of like-minded individuals, because they have a very rigid, straight, heteronormative view of sex. Look, Exodus Cry, who were formerly the International House of Prayer, I swear that was their name. They weren't the International House of Pancakes. I don't know who they had doing their branding, right? We're a firmly anti-gay entity. That's why Melissa McCarthy, famously, a year and a half ago, had donated money and supported Exodus Cry. She read their material. It seems like good work. And as soon as she was told and found out who they really were, she pulled it, right? Because you can only hide for so long. That's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about anti-gay, anti-choice, another fundamental part of their values. Just be honest about who you are. Then the public can really judge you. We're honest about who we are. We are pro-sex work. We are pro-sexual expression. We are pro-protection of children. We are pro-data privacy. That's what we stand for. It's easy to judge people when you know what they stand for. I thought the Netflix documentary really exposed who they actually were at their core. And I think that changed the tone of the discussion, right? We saw, it came out on the 15th of March, and our announcement was on the 16th. Journalist questions were already colored by, I know these people hold these views, but they were never asking it that way before. They were saying, national center. They have a national center. I mean, this sounds like the FBI. It's morality in media, right? It's a bunch of right-wing Catholic extremists who are trying to force their view of morality onto other people.
No, I'm curious, beyond the NCOSE and the Exodus Cry criticisms and their, the trafficking hub movement and everything like that, I'm curious what you have to say to some of the critiques that were brought up in the documentary, like now, I mean, not long after the documentary came out, but since it's been under new ownership. Some of the main ones being, there was an interview with a moderator in Cyprus, and he talked about how they're viewing, close to 1,000 videos a day, at X amount of speed, muted, watching through all of them. And another one, he talks about the backlog of takedown requests and how when a video is taken down, it doesn't impact the SEO because all the metadata is still up there, the title is still there. And I'm curious, has any of that stuff changed?
So I'll say that.
What do
that
you have
itself,
to say to that?
That's a very dated interview. Like that information, I can tell you it is out of date.
How can tell you.
So all I know is this. I know that tags and metadata and text are taken down, proactively. I also know that to keep up with demand, the moderator workforce continues to increase. It's a difficult position, right? It's a tough thing to hire for. In fact, one of the things that I'm really proud of are the employee and mental health supports for those moderators. That is tough work to do. We're also equipping them with tools that can caption and translate language. You're talking about, whether there's volume or not. You need to be able to hear words because you could have content. Let's talk about the moderator job, right? You can have content that is perfectly legal, but if something illegal is being said that changes the context of a scene, for example, that has to be addressed. What I say is the proof is in the pudding, which is, let's look at the NCMEC report. You want to talk about takedown time? What do they say? They say 4 hours, right? I can also tell you that now using the content removal form, any person can automatically flag content. So once again, these are challenging problems. You don't, deal with them by saying, shut it down, lock them up, other nonsense that you hear from Exodus Cry, right? You say, are you serious about addressing the problems? And I can tell you that they are, right? That means we need new technical solutions. We need more human-based solutions. We want to hear critique. But that critique in particular is a dated one and does not have any relation to how content moderation is done today.
And I read, about the 4 hour takedown window, or 4 hour response to
that's just
requests.
a NCMEC, right? We have an instant takedown for requests that are made.
Okay,
right? And for our trusted flagger program, instant takedown.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I wanted to check with that just because it was in a letter that I read from previous stakeholders to the ethics committee. They talked about the 4 hour time that it would take, and that was. The way they worded it, it was specifically for from law enforcement.
Yeah, so that is from law enforcement.
Yeah,
but what
so
we
I'm
did
curious.
Was,
from your regular whoever who just sees it and flags it.
So there's two different things. One is flagging content using it's literally a flag, right? Mm-hmm. So that there are all kinds of reasons you could flag it, right? Mm-hmm. You could flag, I don't like what's in this scene.
Right.
I don't like lesbians, right?
Right.
But there's a content removal form. And when you use a content removal form, we take it down pending review. Right? It's now, unless of course we could see there's some bot activity, a concerted effort. Like, you can imagine we're a very attractive target for bad actors. It happens all the time. But the content removal form does take down content instantly. That was a lesson that the rest of the internet hasn't learned. I'll give you an example. You have, take Facebook, all right? Facebook is a platform where you can post anything you want. You today could post a death threat against me. That's a criminal act. So how long do you think Facebook is going to take that down, right? Now, they have AI tools, they've been learning, but you think over the years, people were using these platforms for illegal means. That doesn't mean that Facebook is a place where that's a hotbed of death threats. No, it's a hotbed of nonsense mostly, right? Like people's daily lives, et cetera, and old people selling things, okay? But it's not a hotbed of those because a criminal has used it for that purpose. Pornhub is similar. in that Pornhub is a place of consensual sexual expression. Have criminals tried to use it for their criminal means, and have they succeeded for windows of time? Of course, they're criminals. That's what they do. They break the law. They figure out how to get around rules. But to define it by that can only be done by someone who has an agenda, right? The agenda is to end adult expression online. We look at this platform, and what we have seen is one that is committed to trust and safety, that there is nothing like it that compares. We talked about the steps at length, what they do to protect the users, to protect content creators, to ensure real moderation, takedown, assistance of law enforcement. I'm nothing but proud to stand with them.
Are MindGeek offices going to be staying in Montreal?
Oh, we love Montreal.
All right, cool.
We love the workforce there. We love the environment. We have an amazing engineering core, right? Things are more remote now than they used to be. That's the nature of the post-COVID world. But we love Montreal. Okay. Montreal's a really strong part of our brand.
Cool. And then
Good city.
Are you asking for opening an office in Ottawa?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. When can we visit?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm getting at.
You do know that Montreal's only 2 hours away. You want to visit? We'll sort it out.
This is true.
I'm down.
Yeah.
Let's
Balls
do
in
it.
our court now, boys.
Yeah. No, we would actually love a visit.
I'll tell you this. So
yeah.
when we went live on the 16th, this is on the 17th when I'm doing my interviews. 16th was our announcements. We couldn't do announcements and interviews the same day. We had work to do, right? On the 17th, I get an announcement with a major media outlet that they'll remain unnamed. And they said, okay, can we have an interview? I reached out to them. We'd like to give you an interview. They said, sure. Can we do like a Zoom call? I said, let's not do a Zoom call. You're in Montreal. Send a camera to MindGeek. They're like, in the MindGeek office? Like, no one at MindGeek was talking to them before, right? I said, no, come down. And they're like, oh, well, actually, we're busy. All our cameras are in use, right? Like, we're like, come down. It's not a secret. New ownership is eager to engage. We would love to show you the work that we're doing. So that'll continue, and we will be, very, very happy to welcome journalists into the office.
Road trip.
That's awesome.
Road trip. Okay. So my final question. Why now? Why did ethical capital partners form only a year ago? Why are they only making this acquisition now? Why now? Why not a couple of years ago when all this was blowing up?
Well,
and why not before that?
So, before that, nobody could acquire MindGeek. It was a screaming powerhouse. I don't know if there was any amount of money under the sun that they would have sold for, right? What we had now was a unique opportunity. And a window was created by the challenge and distress that MindGeek went through had to happen. Their rehabilitation internally had to happen. They had to develop these steps, use a lot of the tools they already had, and a lot of the processes they were already engaging in. They had to take them to another level, right? In other words, they had to go from we're complying with the law in a very complex area where tech is changing, where bad actors are changing all the time, to where they are now, which is hyper compliant for us to look at them. But there's still opportunity because there's still a huge gulf between reality and perception. There's still misinformation, and there's still that important job to be done of you can't just be an adult giant without centering sex workers. So we looked at our team, and it starts with the team. What are our strengths? What is our experience? Is this something that we think we can have a real impact on? And we do our diligence and we see what's actually there. We're extremely impressed by it. We say the opportunity is everything we thought it would be and more. So there's no time like the present, right? And what I'd say is we want this to be a signal to the rest of the industry. Open up, be more transparent, have leadership that's willing to engage, and good things will happen, right? Stigma is born of silence and secrecy. That era is over. That is not the future of the internet, certainly not the future of the adult internet. It's time to come into the mainstream.
Okay. Sweet. Great questions, guys.
Yeah.
That was a dope way to round it off. I appreciate that. I'm going to leave one last thing here. Just if you have anything that you would like to say that you haven't touched on, closing notes on your end.
I'll say this. It's a real thank you, and it's a meaningful one. To have a conversation with people who are prepared to engage, to have an interview that's not puff and it's not nonsense. I'm delighted that you have done the preparation to grapple with these issues. And all I'd ask you to do is to keep using your platform to do what you're doing, right? There is truth out there that gets obscured very often by hype and short clips and misinformation. You've got an incredible platform to use, and we'll always be here at ECP to answer your questions, to be open, to provide responses, to be available and to educate in any way we can. So I'm delighted to be here, and I'm so grateful that you guys had me on.
We appreciate that, man.
Hey,
Thank you very much.
Same goes with you, man. We're really. I was really shocked when you guys replied within 12 hours of that email being sent out. Like,
I don't even reply to him in 12 hours.
And the best part too, like that email, like I said at the top, was like Sarah's like, "Yeah, sorry for the long reply." I was like, I don't even get back to people that quick. Like, I really appreciate you guys taking the time, because I know you guys are going through it right now. It must be super busy.
And staying true to your word.
Yeah.
Because, you've very much made this point of transparency like a forward thing whenever you're talking to any of these outlets, and it's very relieving to see that we didn't get the runaround on any answers or
won't show us your search history.
Yeah, we need to see that search history.
Once those cameras go off, boys, I'll show you the goods.
Yeah, we were worried this would get a little translucent or opaque at some point, but it was very transparent throughout, for sure.
That's who we are as people, right? Ethical Capital Partners, we're a partnership, we're people. And, you work with your values. I think good things happen.
The only reason we had him here was to like hit a button when things got murky.
You didn't have to hit the murky button.
No murky button was hit.
There won't be.
This was awesome, man. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I would love to keep this going. I mean, we would love to come to the offices, check it out. We would also love to do this again, maybe like when you guys feel like there's more news that you would like to talk about 6 months down the road, a year down the road, whatever it is.
100%.
When you're talking to Forbes and all those big places, just remember, down the wire is just around the corner from you guys.
Of course. You're walking distance from my office. From Elgin to Bank. I don't usually go to Bank. It's sketchy. I'm joking. Elgin is where it's at. But it's not far, and we're not hard to find either.
Awesome. That's a great spot to end off on. Summer's coming up too. We can just take some quick little picnic trips out to Elgin.
Yeah, we do lunch at about 12:30 every day. So
easy peasy.
Yeah, we can meet up at the liminal space between Elgin.
No, I don't go to O'Connor. O'Connor is fucked.
We were having that conversation the other day.
There's nothing on O'Connor.
Exactly. We were saying, I swear, the space between Elgin and Bank 100%. Doesn't exist.
It's also two different cultures, by the way.
Right?
There's Bank Street culture. There's Elgin culture, eh?
Yeah, we carry knives.
Yeah. I don't go to this side of town. That 12-minute walk.
It builds character, man. It builds character.
Oh, I love Bank Street.
Well, thank you again very much for coming on,
pleasure.
Solomon. It was a real pleasure having you here today.
Thank you so much.